wow, that is how you welcome someone. Now the talk has to be good.
I love it,
Okay. So we're going to start things out. All right, so I'm going to be talking about one thing, right? There's no warm and fuzzies. This is a call to action. How many people consider themselves ops? What do you think about no ops? I actually try to reason about no ops quite a bit. I think when people talk about ops, and to be honest, I've lived in that world, and when you're in operations, one thing that I've noticed I've done back in the day is say no a lot, right? We got a new that no, right? Doesn't matter, just no off the grip. And this is what people I think are saying no to, right? There's a lot of things that operations people do that make the lives of the organizations completely difficult to deal with. And a lot of times, most ops people have caught themselves in firefighting mode. And it's not necessarily your fault. It's kind of part of the job. But there's another part of the job where you're responsible for making things better and more efficient, okay? So this whole talk is kind of about abstraction, right? And we're going to talk about Health Z as an abstraction. So I won't claim to be a monitoring expert, but I think there's various facets of monitoring. There's logging, metrics, is this thing healthy or not? And when I think back to my time as a sysadmin, I always thought that why doesn't the app know what's wrong with itself? Okay, it's software. I'm building scripts. I'm writing all this code around the app. How come the app can't get a little smarter? So this is what this talk is about. Every team has a group of people that like monitoring, okay? And I guess most of you are here. I was that guy that was dodging the monitoring, right? Whenever there was an outage and someone said we need a new help check, I was the person that was like, nah, that's not my thing, right? Because I always thought about it as reverse engineering the app. It's very brute force, right? You just had an outage. You're going to write a bunch of bash to prevent the next one. It doesn't normally work out. And sometimes the bash causes the next outage, right? I didn't know I couldn't spam that MySQL table. So we gotta think about this slightly different. We gotta stop reverse engineering the app and start working from the inside. So my transition to development started in this way, right? So JBoss, a bunch of Java, and you hear Java, you're like nightmare, right? You think of exceptions and logs, all right? But the truth is there's a lot of ways I think operations people can contribute to the overall application. And I think around the space of robustness and health checks is one of them. So I came to Monitorama, it's like people are definitely not doing monitoring the way I used to do it 8 years ago. So I showed someone this. I was like, does this look like what people are doing? Show of hands. People are doing some of this, right? Regardless of tool, are you doing something like this? You're checking all these things, right? It's a lot of hands. I'm like, no way in hell are people still doing this 8 years later, right? I'd have figured something would have changed. And unfortunately, things haven't. And the one thing that I want you to think about is all of these checks, right? Can they not live in the app? Can we go from this to that? Why is that hard? Some people would say the developers have no interest in this kind of code, right? But for most companies these days, it's a shared repository. Nothing is stopping you from issuing a pull request to say, look, we're going to kill some bash scripts. We're going to move some of that logic inside the app, right? And most people are now ready for doing this. So this talk will be talking about what you could do to kind of get to this state. Now, this doesn't replace everything, right? We don't turn off logging. You're not going to turn off other things that you're doing to make sure the app is sane. But this is one way to start thinking about making your checks actually meaningful to the application, right? You're going to be able to do some things that you just can't do from the outside. So I think of that as abstraction, right? A lot of tools that are being written today, they have a health check endpoint. This is great. I don't have to figure out how to probe it. I don't have to look at logs and look for errors. They just have one endpoint with some semantics that tells me what's going on. So we're going to look at a little bit of that today and maybe review some code. I think when people say no ops, I think this is kind of what they have in mind. Ops needs to move closer to the application. A lot of the scripts that people are writing externally won't work if I decide to run in Heroku. They won't work if I decide to run everything in a container. There's nowhere to run your scripts. Some of these things don't even ship with a shell anymore, right? So a lot of our tool belts go out the door. So you have no choice but to actually move our operational experience closer to the app, right? This could end up being in the platform. This could be you writing code directly in the app, And today I'm going to talk about maybe both. Can the platform help us out? And what can we do natively in the app to actually make this thing a lot more robust and then start to have real collaboration? So last slide, okay? So we're going to do demos, see if this actually works. So we're going to start with an idea of what this should look like. All right, so for this talk, I've written a couple of things. Another thing most people say is that I can't do this pattern because my SQL doesn't support it, right? I have no choice. But the truth is you can actually build adapters on top of those systems that don't have a health endpoint, right? You can just ship them together and expose the Help Z endpoint and allow this shim to do all of the heavy lifting, right? So the nastiness is still there, but we gain the abstraction for even apps that we didn't write in-house. All right? So for this talk, I'll be playing with a couple of these things. One is going to be called app-hap-z. So I put all this code on GitHub so you can actually see how it's written. But this is simple code. There's no clever algorithms here. There's no CS degree required. This is very much the same kind of stuff that you write in Bash. You're going to have to learn the language of your particular company. But I think the price of admission is worth it. So what we start to do now is I've removed a bunch of the logic of the app and just focused on the things that we need to do our health checks. So more than likely, you're going to reuse the same configuration that the application's using. So if the application needs credentials to connect to the database, so will you. You can actually share those things. The other things you want to do is, probably have your own endpoint for Help Z. So what I've chosen to do here is register one handler called /HelpZ. You work with your dev team and you say, hey, I would like to own that particular endpoint. Right? This is the place that we're going to collaborate on, making sure the application is healthy. And I'm going to write my code there, just like you write your code for the business logic. I'm going to write my code here. And that handler belongs to you. And also, and it can be a shared responsibility, but this is where I think you can make your first strike. Now within this, I have a Help Z package where I group all of my checks. And these checks can be simple. You don't have to do something game-changing day one. And in my case, here I have a help check that allows me to check the database. So let me just show you this in raw mode. And this is how simple most of this stuff can look. Okay? So here, all I'm doing is grabbing the credentials to create a database connection, right? So I follow the conventions of whatever programming language I'm in, whether that's Java or Ruby. In this case, this is Golang. This is very straightforward stuff here. And that's about 15 lines of code. And this will do health checks on my database just to see that it's there. Now, why is this important? The nice thing about this is being deployed with the app. So regardless of where I deploy this app, this check will be native to the application. I've seen people try to probe these things from the outside, but the problem with that is what if you're in a network partition where your script can get through, but the app can't? So you're reporting green, and 1 out of 20 apps can't connect to the data store. So this kind of removes some of that pain by having this closer to the application itself. I think we can write this code. So what we're going to do is go through a scenario where it's our time to do this, okay? So we're going to start with a very simple application, right? There's 2 tiers, right? Just a web app, connects to a database, and then we're going to improve that app a little bit over time. All right, so don't worry about the tool that I'm using to deploy it because it's amazing and it can overwhelm the talk. Let's just focus on this Help Z pattern, what it can do for us. What's the number one problem when someone deploys an app and you're not sure it's going to work? You do the deployment. You ever seen internal server error 500? That's not a good thing, okay? That's when untested apps like continuous delivery and your users are like, what is this 500 business? Like, that's a feature, right? That's only for you. Don't worry about it. We won't charge you, okay? So what we want to do now is deploy our application. So we've got this database, right? So we see that we have MySQL running. I'm like, yeah, this is no problem. And a nice thing about this, I've written an adapter that sits on top of MySQL so that way I can monitor it the same way I want to monitor everything else. I want a single Help Z endpoint, all right? And the way I'm doing this is I'm deploying MySQL together with a little wrapper. So don't worry about all of this code. But what I'm doing is deploying this application right on top of MySQL. And this app will expose the Help Z endpoint. If I hit that app, it will do all the native things that you would do with your scripts or internal tools. But it'll be running exactly where MySQL is deployed. The nice thing about this, we move MySQL, the check follows, okay? So MySQL is up and running, and it shows that it's ready. Now, one thing that the help Z endpoint will do for us is going to help the platform be a little bit smarter. So when I deploy my app, I do not want to add it to any service discovery or make it available for traffic until it proves itself ready by passing the help Z endpoint. Okay? So what I'm going to do is launch an application, right? So I'm going to launch an app called help Z. So this is a simple app. It runs in a container, and this app has its own help check endpoint. So as this thing gets deployed, we see that it's running, but it's not ready. Now that bit is critical, right? You start sending traffic before it's ready to take it, you get those 500s. So what's going to happen here is this is going to become ready, and then it can start receiving traffic. So a lot of these systems today will do automatic registration of your apps as they come online. So now that this thing is online, I can actually look at its service registry to see if it was picked up. Someone watch me do that too. Someone's like, that's not what I think you want to do. All right, so I'm going to describe the service, this registry for this app. And I see that it has one endpoint. All right, so this is great. So let's see if it actually works. So I'll go to the browser and see if this pulls up. So we come here, and let's pull this up. Yes. You know how you're in your room before your talk, you're like, this better work. It worked. All right, so this is our application, right? And I'm printing the host name to make sure that the right things are coming up, right? So that's the host name here. It's the name of the application, and it matches. So we got version 1.0. So this is great. So now someone says, hey, that's awesome. Give me 5 more of them, all right? Now I want to avoid 500s as these things come online. So I'm going to rely on the health checks to make sure that we do not see them in our backend registry, because if they show up there, they're going to get traffic. So we want the health checks to delay things. So here we're going to do really quick is scale our application. So we're going to scale our deployments. This is called app, and then we're going to give it a certain number of replicas. Throw out a number. You guys are terrible. 11. 1,000 breaks the demo. Can't do it. Hey, you got to know your limitations. You know. All right, so you get 11, right? So the developer says 11. And I'm like, you know what? I got a safety net in here. Now, until these things become healthy, meaning they can reach their database. So inside of my health checks, I'm making sure your database is online. If there was a cache that was required, those are all the things that should be hidden behind that help Z endpoint. That way, I don't need to keep track of with every app and how we do things. So let's look at our endpoints really quick. And we start to see them come online. So now I have 3 plus 8, which is 11. So now they're all online. My guess is that they're all now ready. Okay? So this prevents me from having 500s. Simple. Super simple. So let's refresh this. And we see that we're getting some round robin action. Now people start to say we should do continuous delivery. I love the platform. We're going to start doing this all over the place. Great. So you get the new app, V2. Everyone's ambitious now, right? So you don't even do code review as an ops person. You're just like, whatever, man. Whatever you got, continuously deliver it, right? Because I'm going to be at home. So you say, hey, I got version 2 of the app. It's like, hey, we all know what we're doing here. Let's go ahead and just deploy the thing. You want to have a meeting? No. We're doing DevOps. There's no meeting needed. We should do our thing. So, all right, let's do it. So kubectl, this is the developer now deploying to production, right? Because that was one of the goals. Everyone can do their own deployments. And boy, it gets really exciting. So you're like, all right, just go ahead, man. I showed you how to do it. So kubectl create -f. Oh, yeah, just create a deployment. Things are going to be fine. I promise you. So you're like, all right, cool, man. Oh, and what we do here is we do a canary deployment, right? So we need to just test one of them and make sure everything's working. I'll be at the house, okay? So you run it, right? And they're like, oh, it worked. Sweet. So they go to look at everything. And they're like, okay, it's running. Doesn't seem to be ready. Database is up. So they call me. I'm like, all right, how long has it been running? Like 12 seconds. I'm damn, you're not patient, man. On-calls are for emergencies. All right, we're 27 seconds in. So people are worrying, okay? So the first thing you do is you look at logs. Remember, help Z doesn't replace the logs. But it is protecting us right now. It's not ready. So if we look at our back end, what's in our back end right now? I should still see 11, okay? Let's see. Let's see if we still see 11. All right. So while everyone else is panicking, I'm not. I know it's not going to get traffic. No, there's no 500, but you go with it, right? You want that medal, the hero complex. I'm going to save the day. I'll be up in a minute. So you join the bridge, right? You check things out, and you're like, oh, man, what's going on? Did you do anything different? I'm like, nope. Small code change, I promise. So you're like, okay. So you look at it, it's like, okay, well, we get our secrets from Kubernetes. This is cool, but it's still not ready. Let's just take a look at the logs. So this is how you catch everyone. You're just like, let's look at the logs, man. Sit by me. So you just bring out the logs. And you look in. You see these errors. You're like, what the hell is Vault? Oh, I forgot to tell you, man. See, what happened was I was reading Hacker News, and the HashiCorp guy said that everything else is alt, and this is what we should be doing now. So I switched the app over to Vault for secrets. It's like, all right, well, there's a small problem. You actually need Vault running. So if you're an ops, you got to do, what does ops do, right? You can never say you don't know how to do anything. Like, do you know Vault? Have you used it before? You're like, hell yeah. I've used Vault tons of times. Let's split up right now. Like, you go back to your desk and figure out an issue. I'm going to go back to mine. We need some time away from each other. So what you do is what every respectable... What's the ETA? I don't know. I can't read that fast, okay? So now we're screwed, okay? So we got the docs up, and it's like, all right, this is going to take a while, okay? So you're a fast reader. So you go through this. Like, first you need to install the damn thing. And let's say we have a container for it, so we're going to roll with it. So we need Vault, okay? So now we're going to create a container for Vault, okay? So the nice thing about Vault, it also respects the whole help Z pattern. So I know that I can make sure that I've gotten it right. So I read all this documentation, and it tells me to do all this stuff, okay? So I'm going to have a stateful Vault server. I'm going to store my data. I'm going to try to put all the credentials in place so the app can work because we ported everything over. So kubectl create -f deployments Vault, okay? So we have this thing running. And now I don't know anything about it, but I won't tell anyone. Stay positive in the Slack channel, right? That's one thing you got to know. Always stay almost done. One more thing. What would that thing be? Getting it to work. Okay. But you got this, right? So we're going to do this. All right, so we see that this thing is also not ready. So this is where the pattern starts to pay off. I don't know anything about the log messages. I don't know if there's going to spit out anything. So let's go look at the logs. And this is where I think this is so important, this particular pattern. So we say kubectl logs, and we get the logs for this thing. So we say logs, and this thing's like, everything is straight. No errors. But it's not ready. So I'm glad I put this health check in there, because I would have thought things were good to go because this thing booted up. So now let's see what the health check endpoint tells us, okay? So now that we have this thing up, we'll get the pods. So I want to get this IP. So I want to see the health check now. Do not put Vault on the public internet, okay? You do not want to give away your secrets that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to port forward to it. So I'm going to get a proxy. So all of you trying to hack my demo, haha, not going to work that easy. All right, so port forward. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to port forward to this particular Vault instance. And I'm just going to see what's going on here. So from the docs, it told me that things run on 8200. So I'm just going to localhost that to my local machine. So now I have a port there. And now I'm going to check its health endpoint and see if I get anything useful from it. So I hit this. Ooh, internal 500. That's not good, okay? All right, that's the easy thing to know. And it's trying to give me some hints here. It's saying that this thing is sealed, right? So that means Vault can't do anything until you unseal it. Good to know, right? So it's up, but it isn't ready. So now let's figure out how to make it ready. Now I have to unseal this thing. That means log in and type in a bunch of keys, and then it will unseal itself. This thing is trying to be super secure. So I'm going to log in to my running Vault. So I'm going to get the name again. So kubectl exec -tty -i. And let's go over here to Vault. And let's get a bash shell, because this is what you do in production, people. You know, you log in. I didn't cause this problem. I'm solving problems. So I'm in on production. So the docs tell me that I need to set this variable so I can work with this. So set the Vault address. Okay. And then I'm just going to make sure that I can hit this locally. All right. And this is going to be on port 8200. All right. So let's see what the status is on this thing. All right. So it's saying it's sealed, and I need 3 keys to unlock it. And just like any responsible security-minded person, you have all of the keys on your laptop. Okay, so you have all the keys. And this is totally legit, so don't like judge me right now. This is like what you gotta do, because I don't know anyone that I trust to get the keys, so I have them all, okay? Job security, baby. You're fired. Like, I don't know who's gonna unlock Vault the next time it reboots. It's like, shit. All right, you can stay. That's what I thought. All right, so we're going to unlock this thing. All right, let's see. Whew, sweet. So let's look at the status now. All right, so it says it's good. Let's get out of here. And then let's go ahead and check that health check thing again, because that seems to be useful, at least more useful than logs. Ooh, 200, okay. I'm gonna trust that now. So Vault's up, and I did a bunch of other configuration. We don't have that much time. So Vault is up. So now what I want to do is see if it's ready. Great. Vault is 1 of 1. It's ready. So why is my app still not working? Let's move on to the next phase of troubleshooting. I also have a HealthZ endpoint there, but we haven't even gotten to the point where we can use it. So logs are still useful in this particular pattern. So let's look at the logs one more time and see if we can fix this issue. Can't look up the Vault DNS name, right? So we're trying to do a get on this DNS name called Vault. I assume my service discovery is working. So let's check if the service is in place. I just deployed the Vault app, but we need the actual DNS entry. So I look at this, and I see that there is no Vault there. So let's just add that so we can get a DNS entry. All right, so we now have our Vault entry in place. Everything looks good here. Let's see, get pods. Oh, wow. 101, it's running. Now, people want to see this in action, so you got to test things. Don't make an ass out of yourself in Slack and say it's done, okay? Make sure the damn thing works, okay? So what I'm going to do is scale this thing up a little bit to make sure I can actually see it. Let's do this. First of all, we don't need 11 of these things, wise guy. What we're going to do is just make it balanced out a little bit. Let's just do 5, and then we'll do 5 of the other one. Okay? So we'll have a total of 10 of these in a moment. And then I'm going to wait till they're up. So let's describe. Don't you hate when people don't know the shortcuts? Like, dude, Control R. Like, I got it. I'm going to get there. All right, so most of them that are healthy are now coming online. And then before you update that Slack channel, you're looking good. Now, this is the moment of truth. And we refresh. V2 is up. Mic drop. Thank you. That's the end of my talk. Any questions? I'll go there and then there.
If you instrument your tooling to look from your app perspective, you still miss the user's perspective coming in. So there's still tooling needed to kind of come to like a load balance in the front end. Is that still the same pattern as what we were doing before?
Yeah, so remember I said this a couple of times during the talk. You don't replace those things. This is to give you a little bit more insight, right? So you'll never get rid of your external going through the full layer. You still need those things. But a lot of people have another hole in their testing. They have all that other stuff, but they have nothing inside the app that's giving them the real deal. And I've used this pattern quite a bit, and especially when you start to have like 1,000 of these things running online and you're aggregating all those Help Z endpoints. I haven't showed you here yet, but normally my Help Z, I'll put some metadata like, here's my host name, here's the IP I was trying to get to, and it just lets me zoom in super quick on troubleshooting those things. So to your question is, yes, you do not get rid of all your other checks. This is additive. But you may see redundancy where it just makes sense to bring it into the app, right?
I completely agree with what you're talking about. I try to make a distinction between shallow and deep health checks. Shallow health checks just check the instance is healthy, wired up, what would be work, if its back ends were healthy. Deep health checks actually iterate through all the back ends that it cares about. And that, because with AWS, it will terminate things that are otherwise healthy that are just failing back end checks versus Kubernetes, which won't. You have to think about these things.
So I have something to that point. A lot of systems will immediately start restarting apps based on a failing health check, and sometimes this is the absolute wrong thing to do. So in my demo here, I actually put these health checks as readiness checks, right? So I'm assuming that my app will have a responsibility of knowing how to shut itself down, and if it gets too broken, yes, we can have our platform restart it, but you do need to make a distinction between liveliness checks and readiness checks. A lot of times readiness is saying, look, the app itself is okay, I don't necessarily need to be restarted, but one of my external dependencies is not. So much so that I would like someone to pull me out of the load balancer to make sure I don't get traffic, right? So that you do have to think about that and make that distinction. There in the green shirt?
Why is it called Help Z?
Yes, so the question is, why is it called Help Z? This is a legacy thing at Google. I asked someone right before I got on stage, hey man, before someone asked me this, why is it called Help Z? And the answer was, there's a lot of things at Google that has Z at the end, right? Product Z, status Z, so you get Help Z. And I honestly think it probably helps with clashes, right? So someone already owns health, right? Who the hell would put Z at everything, right? So you just own it, okay? So it's holdover from an old decision. That person probably doesn't work there no more, maybe they do. But it's just one of those things. There is no cool answer. I was hoping to get a cool answer, and I was let down as much as you are right now. All right, one more question. Here.
So tying this back to Adrian's talk in the beginning, where observing systems behavior really requires understanding like the full profile of their performance, understanding like the latency of every call against an app. How do you foresee that integrating with something like Help Z, where you can actually understand a change in behavior instead of just this red light, green light stuff?
Yeah, so that's actually the goal with Help Z. So, you know, a lot of times you're collecting these metrics internal to the app, and they're very expensive to push off the box, right? And then have something else aggregate them. That can take a bit of time, especially if there's a lot of data. So as you're summarizing these things in the app, those could be triggers that turn Help Z the next time someone asks, you know, for the status of Help Z. You could say Help Z is not 200 because the latency is way too high for this particular part of my system. Or you can give other status codes if you want to get more granular. You can say 205 or something that means, hey, I am not the best fit, so if you have a weighted load balancer, give me a lower priority right now because I'm not in the best shape as the next actor is. And then also semantic data comes back. You notice in the Volt output that it gave me some details. It said, hey, I'm running, but I'm sealed. So I knew exactly the next thing I needed to do. And in a longer version of this demo, I actually put out a lot of data for all the checks. So if you hit my endpoints, I tell you, here's all the checks. And you can imagine just using like the RESTful way of saying head, and I tell you all the checks that I support, so you kind of know what's actually passing and what's actually failing. So that was my last questions. I'll be available outside if you have more. Thank you guys so much.